Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we're discussing some pretty surprising news coming out of the San Jose Sharks camp today, and that is that they have fired head coach David Quinn. Now, the reason that this is surprising isn't because there is a lack of cause. There are certainly multiple reasons for why Mike Grier would want to make this move, something I'll get to a bit later on. But the reason I say that is that at the end of the day, this roster constructed by Mike Grier was designed specifically to lose games. The Sharks wanted to get the best possible draft pick at the end of this season. And so despite any faults that may have been in David Quinn's coaching situation this season with the San Jose Sharks, he did technically accomplish that goal. The Sharks finished dead last in the league and will have the best possible odds at winning the first overall draft pick within the next couple of weeks. Having said that, as I said, there are many reasons for why Mike Grier would want to make a change like this. And any one of these could be a specific sort of smoking gun type of situation, and likely many of them would combine to create an overwhelming case against Quinn in this spot. Let us start off first with these last few days. This Mike Grier, I imagine, has been conducting some exit interviews with a lot of the San Jose Sharks players and has been asking their opinions about their fellow teammates, but primarily, I guess you could say, about the coaching staff. And it would not be as surprised if multiple players would have called David Quinn out for maybe not doing the best of jobs when it came to actually coaching this past season. As we know, Quinn has made some questionable lineup changes and choices over his time with the San Jose Sharks, and I cannot imagine that he hasn't rubbed a couple of players the wrong way due to that very fact. And since it is much easier to swap out a coach than it is to swap out a handful of players, that may have forced Mike Grier's hand. Another reason for this is that over the coming couple of years, the San Jose Sharks are likely to have at least a small, but more likely a large infusion of young talent into the roster. And one thing that we have seen from David Quinn's previous experience in the NHL with the New York Rangers is that he may not be the best coach when it comes to fostering young and talented forward type of players. We know what he has as his history with the Rangers, Alexis Lafreniere and Capo Caco. And so to leave him here with the San Jose Sharks, perhaps Mike Grier was not willing to take such a risk, as it is so important for San Jose for these young players to work out immediately so that they can try and get out of this rebuild for them, in their eyes at the very least, as fast as possible, and that it doesn't end up in a Buffalo Sabres type of situation where the Sharks end up missing the playoffs for over a decade amount of time. So that type of risk might not be what the San Jose Sharks are looking for. Another possible reason for this is that it's one thing when you lose a bunch of games, that is expected to happen when you have a roster like this, but it's another thing to get completely embarrassed in the games that you have played. It was Nico Sturm in his public exit interview with the media who mentioned as though it felt as though the San Jose Sharks were getting embarrassed on a weekly basis this past season. And who could really blame him for those feelings, as there were a large percentage of games where the Sharks just had absolutely zero chance in and gave up 6, 7, 8, 9, up to 10 goals against. It was back in November, very notably, when the San Jose Sharks gave up 10 goals against to the Vancouver Canucks, and then in the very next game gave up another 10 goals against to the Pittsburgh Penguins. The fact that David Quinn, the coach of the San Jose Sharks, couldn't get his team to rally around a 10-goal loss to actually prevent a second one from happening in the very game after is kind of the final nail in the coffin for him. I had mentioned that very same thing in my game review of that Pittsburgh Penguins game, where it felt as though there was not really much coming back from that moment. It was Mike Grier himself who had to kind of step down from the general manager position and come in and act as a pseudo head coach just to try and get the San Jose Sharks on the correct page and playing at least a somewhat respectable level of hockey. And while that was the most egregious situation with those back-to-back 10 goals against, it wasn't the last of those embarrassing type of games where, again, it goes back to that weekly basis type of thing where San Jose just kept losing these terrible, terrible games that are just so demotivating and create such a depressing environment for the players around them. Another possible reason, the fact that we have so many of them, is definitely indication for why David Quinn should or ended up getting fired. But another possible reason is perhaps Mike Grier is actually hoping that the San Jose Sharks can kind of come out of this rebuild a bit faster than perhaps they should. And this might not be the correct decision, but it is definitely possible that Mike Grier is hoping the Sharks will be a better team, notably by next season. Perhaps not at the playoff level. I don't think he's necessarily that delusional. It would be quite crazy for the Sharks to make such a jump, but perhaps to get to a tier of the NHL where, let's say, the Calgary Flames found themselves last season, where the Flames were clearly a tier above the basement dwellers like the San Jose Sharks or the Chicago Blackhawks or the Anaheim Ducks, but were also a tier below the playoff fighting teams like the St. Louis Blues or the Detroit Red Wings or the Pittsburgh Penguins, kind of in that 8th or 9th last range. If the Sharks were actually looking to get into that next season, I don't think David Quinn was the answer, considering his recent track record is last place and 4th last with some pretty bad games throughout. So if Mike Grier is indeed looking to be slightly more competitive next season, a choice at coach does indeed make some sense. But in the end here, when it comes to this particular decision made by Mike Grier, I doubt there will be too many tears shed by many Sharks fans. I'm sure a lot of them were already kind of at their wits' end when it came to David Quinn, and so now we look forward to see who will become the new bench boss and what direction will they take the San Jose Sharks. Class dismissed.